Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are crime dramas. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the series premiere of Florida Man. Great series premiere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, obviously we get introduced to Mike. I think it's so interesting because once we got introduced to him in like that kind of like gamblers meeting, I thought like, okay, so this is the end of the story or maybe the middle of the story, and you know, it's like in res media type of situation. But no, it's like, no, and then we skip to a year later because I guess that was him trying to get clean. Well, maybe that was already why he was working for Moss. And it's sad that one of the people he goes after, like after that time skip, is Gil, a guy that was also in that gambler's like anonymous stuff. And it's like, oh man, that is kind of sucky, taking advantage of that opportunity. I mean, you go where you get sent. You don't really have a choice, but it's like, hey, this is someone you probably maybe opened up around and who opened up around you, so it is a little jacked up. I love that it's like all these threats about breaking his leg or whatever, and home dude breaks his leg running away from Mike, and like it was pretty gnarly too. It reminds me of Economos in Peacemaker. It was that type of like trip and fall. You're just like, ugh. I can't really say too much. I had a butterfly fracture in my left leg because I slipped on something in my own house. So shouldn't cast aspersions, you know. But either way. It's interesting to find out about Mike and Deli that, because it looked like he was checking her out. It's like, there is something there. There has been for God knows how long. I don't know if it's in the entire time that he's worked for Moss, which we don't even really know how long he's been working for Moss. But Deli, I think she puts up with a lot of stuff from Moss, but it's like, here's this chain that belonged to someone else. I interpreted that scene a lot differently than she did. She was like, okay, you got this from you stole it from somebody because it's got someone else's hair in it. I thought as much, but I thought like, you killed a guy and you stole it from him, or like this is something some guy was wearing to pay off his debt. It still could be applicable. So for her, it's like, right, I want something that's not associated with a crime. I just want to have some form of a normal life, which we do learn later on from a conversation between Mike and her that it's not like she's in this because she loves Deli. It's like she's stuck and she's just been looking for her way out. This whole series has been her opportunity, her way out. So, but yeah, like she says she got something from, Moss, and now it's like now she's paying it back as like kind of his girlfriend and stuff. But I'm curious what is that, because I was thinking like, I guess based on the trailer, I knew he was kind of like the mobster's son, but I didn't realize like his dad is going, like he is the main guy mobster now because his dad passed away like at some point. So I'm like, okay, but I wonder what, maybe that's going to come full circle too, and maybe that's going to be an important part of this story, important part to Deli's story. Maybe we get flashbacks of who she is, especially like this first episode really dives into Mike's or his family circumstances to some extent. So maybe in a future episode, we'll dive into Deli's, kind of learn more about who she is, where she came from, and how she got mixed up with Moss. Like, what did he do for her that she has to pay off this debt by being like his girlfriend? Like maybe he helped her kind of get away from something, and being around him was kind of like maybe her safety net from it. But it can't be that, because I mean, I was about to say like, why would she leave that safety net if that's the purpose of it? But it's like, yeah, maybe he served the purposes of what, but because she has to play this role of like the girlfriend, and she's a caged canary essentially, you know. We also got introduced to Mike's ex. The way he said it is like, he's like referenced his wedding vow. So I'm like, I guess his ex-wife, he did give back the ring because I guess he gambled it away. But yeah, she's a cop. She just made detective, and she wants to take down Moss, and she wants Mike's help. But for Mike, it's like, no. I'm not going to be working. I'm not about to put myself in that position, because I guess he knows well enough to say, hey, anyone that works for Moss, like if you're working for a gangster and you end up being an informant against them, you're as good as dead. So I'm not really going down that route. So, but when Deli ends up saying she wants to run away, she's even suggesting her and Mike run away after they shagged. It's like, last time was supposed to be the last time, which always ends up being the case. But she wanted to go to Florida, and he was like, no, I'm not going there. I got out of their place, and I got out of there. I'm never going back. And she's like, oh, you're from Florida. I wondered if she just, it feels too coincidental that you just happen to pick the place he's from. And maybe that is just kind of supposed to be the effed up coincidence of like, yeah, all this set that emotion. Like if he had never mentioned that, maybe she would have never thought like, oh, I'm going to go to Florida. Because it's like, right, if you disappear, you knew, maybe on some level she knew Moss would send someone to look for her, and that maybe plays into like what her story is, that she knew Moss would send Mike because two things. One, Mike is like Moss's like number one guy to handle stuff. Two, she probably knew that Mike would use this opportunity to try and get from underneath Moss. He was initially only going to like knock off 50 grand from his debt, which is like, okay, so how much do you owe? Like it feels like, I guess he didn't want to ask too much then. He asked for the entire clearing of his debt later, but that's because it's like, right, it's in front of me. This is an opportunity. I'm also going to do something I don't want to do. Like she left for a reason. She had to escape. I get that, but I'm going to have to drag her back because this helps set me free. But now I think it's that conundrum of, well, for her the cost of my freedom is her freedoms, and he does care about her despite their effed up circumstances. I even love like he says like, oh, like, you know, I'm trying to help, I'm not gambling anymore, and that was like after they had sex, and she's like, oh, you think so? Because even I was like, yeah, I think most people call this a gamble, because gambling doesn't just have to be in the more traditional like, hey, I'm betting money on something. It can be in the very like high risk, high reward, or just like thrill elements of your life. And sleeping with a mobster's girlfriend seems pretty like high risk and thrillish that you just can't shake that. Like it's coming out in some other shape or form. If it's not you gambling away money, it is going to be that risky behavior is going to manifest in other avenues. It does seem like he does go. So anyway, he has to go to Florida to track down Deli. What I think is interesting, though, it doesn't seem like it's like he never goes back home. It seems like he does. The way he was talking to his niece, it's like, oh yeah, like I pop in, like, yeah, I'm the stranger you don't really know that pops in every 5 years to give you advice or something. And it's like, so it does seem like he comes back extremely on every blue moon. Like, I guess, unless, like, circumstances call for it, but we get introduced to his sister, Patsy, and his dad, who I thought was like, is that who I think it is? And it's like, yeah, like, that actor, the thing I best know him for is the show, God Without a Trace. I'm going to butcher his name, but it's like Anthony LaPaglia? It's Anthony LaPaglia. Probably still butchering that, but because I also like for one, he's got a beard and he's tatted. Like most often when I've seen him and stuff, not just Without a Trace, but with that in other stuff here and there, I've never seen him with facial hair, so that's what kind of threw me for a loop. Like I said, plus the tats too. But yeah, it is interesting finding out his dad's a cop, which I guess maybe on some levels kind of makes sense, because it turns out his dad's like, oh, I'm not like a regular cop, I'm also a corrupt cop. I got to retire with my pension intact, and everyone kind of knows that you are on the shady side of things, but it's just kind of like accepted. Like he was able to kind of just, I think everyone just kind of like lets him do his thing to some extent, because I guess he's just very good at doing both sides of things, being a cop and being a corrupt cop. But it seems like they've implied like Mike might be one too, because there was a conversation between Sonny and Mike. I don't remember what it was, but Sonny had asked Mike something, and Mike had kind of given a response of like, his circumstances don't seem to be the same as his dad. Like I said, his dad's got full pension, all the works, it all worked out. Doesn't seem like that's the case for Mike, but also that he had this conversation with Moss near the end of the episode, and Moss was like, that's for you, you're the detective here. And I was like, oh, because that solidified it for me being like, oh, is he actually a cop? It seems like that's the case. And also, his ex, Iris, was kind of implying like, oh, you're out there playing cop, like, don't do that, type of situation. But either way, like I said, I mean, it's not really a phrase, but it's like, you're the detective here. It's usually like, oh, you're investigating something. So I don't know if Moss meant that in a figurative way of just kind of like the phrasing of like, oh yeah, like, you're playing detective here, so you go ahead and figure it out. Or did he mean that literally because he is an ex-detective because of just shenanigans involved in his life and maybe stuff maybe just once again, because yes, the phrasing from Mike was like, right, that the apple, you're probably happy that the apple didn't fall too far from the tree, fell right beside the tree, which Sonny was like, no, every parent wants their child to be better than them, not just think that they're better. So obviously it's like, you look down on me, but you're really in the same scummy situation I am. It's kind of like Sonny's perspective on it. Either way. Also, I feel bad for Mike too. The fact of the matter is he goes there, he's at a beach at one point in time, and this woman's screaming for help, and no one's helping. The lifeguard literally doesn't step in until Mike's in the water. He's trying to do that. I was like, hey, look at you doing the honorable thing. And then the woman's like, yeah, he tried to assault me. I'm like, what? He's like, I'm trying to save you. She's like, yeah, then why my top off? He's like, I don't know. And he tried to go back in the water to get her top. I'm like, he kind of Mike had an anime moment right there. Cause obviously that's a cliche of like, oh, I'm trying to save your life, or I do something trying to help you, boom, your top or your clothes came off or something like it. Once again, he had an anime moment. He had an anime protagonist moment. Like, no, I'm going to try to make this up, and had another unfortunate event happen to him. That involved a shark biting the hell out of his thigh. Luckily, it didn't rip off his dick. I love that his sister was like, hey, I actually checked for you. Actually, I didn't check. The nurse checked for you, but yeah, your dick is still okay. And even later on, his niece being like, do you have to sit down to pee? And she's like, her mom is like, go to your room. And I love he has to clarify, I don't actually have to sit down to go to, it's like, no, I don't know where she's getting that from. Cause I love that he's like, also it's like, it's kind of shitty because it's like, yeah, you're supposed to be there on this job to find Deli, and now you're like blasted all over the internet, to the point that because you are a local, it adds more fuel to it, and now that it's spread like wildfire, to the point that now Moss is like, hey, you're from Florida? And it's like, oh, I think I know why you didn't tell me. And it's like, I just assumed he was like, well, I guess I was like, maybe he doesn't like want to talk about his past, but it's like, no, Moss is like, you didn't want me to know where your family lives. I'm like, oh, that probably makes the most sense. I mean, because obviously there's a Florida connection of, well, she ran to Florida and he, like, it's from Florida. I thought that was kind of the reason why he didn't say anything about it, because he didn't want to make Moss draw any conclusions or connections there in that capacity. But it's like, no, the whole family angle makes sense. But it might also be because it's like, well, I don't know if, well, I'm an ex-detective and stuff like that, but how much does he, because he probably knows next to nothing about Mike's family. Because it's like, yeah, you work for the guy, you probably won't know too much. I mean, because it doesn't seem like Moss is the type to do his due diligence when, like, looking into someone. It's like, hey, you owe me money, you work for me, that's all we're gonna, like, get from that, so. There's also the Gil situation I thought was interesting. Gil being the dude who Mike was threatening, who later on Moss was threatening too, because it was about some gold coin, which seems to be at the center of all of this. Because it's just like Mike said, he said at the very beginning of the show, he's like, it started with gold. And so we keep going back to this flashback of him as a kid finding some gold. Maybe that's what jump-started his dad's career in, like, the criminal world in some capacity. And then maybe it played some role in him being a gambler that he, like, all of that is probably like, it all started there. That was the jump-off point. But Gil's connected to Dad. The coin, like, see, the thing is, I'm sure he'll learn about it probably within the next episode, but Mike doesn't know that the gold coin has some part to play in this, because he doesn't know Gil was about that. That was going to be Gil's, like, a means of getting that money he needed within the next 2 weeks to pay off Moss. But we know it's also associated with Deli, whatever she's doing in Florida, because Moss has no idea why she's going. He just assumed, like, oh, she picked Florida for no reason. It's like, no, she had to have picked it for a reason. Like, out of any state she could have decided to run away to, why Florida in particular? Like I said, I think she legitimately didn't know about Mike being from Florida until he mentioned that. So, but maybe she was kind of hoping he'd go with her to kind of help her with what she's up to, because this is probably going to be her opportunity to disappear. Maybe she has something to do with, because Moss seemed legitimately like, wait, Gil's dead? Like, he didn't seem like he knew. I mean, but to be fair, it's like he's doing the thing of like, yo, I can't believe we're talking about this on an open line. But it's like, no, he said he had nothing to do with Gil, but we don't know. for Mike, it's like, right, I'll beat up people and yada, 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 but no killing people or hurting people, like, in that capacity. You know, this is how you get your money back and stuff. That's also supposed to be like the gangster thing of, oh, I'm going to threaten you and I'm going to hurt you, but I'm not going to kill you because dead men can't pay their debts. That's always kind of been my, but I mean, if there's a big enough issue, I'm sure those rules can be broken, and I don't know if Gil broke those rules or not. I don't know. It didn't seem like Moss was in a position where he was going to kill her, kill him. So it might be associated either. I don't think Deli did it, but maybe what Deli was a part of, maybe ended up getting Gil killed, and maybe she doesn't even know that Gil's dead. Maybe they were even partners. And who knows? Mike did track her down, and what I thought was interesting is when he ended up tracking. When he ended up tracking Deli down, he waited outside because she was with a gentleman friend. And I was like, is he? At first I was like, is he giving her time to like, right, you know, get your nut off? I'm not going to interfere. I'm going to let you get your nut off, and then I'm going to come busting in, or maybe he's just going to wait for her to come out, or just didn't want to interrupt, or most likely because of their thing. He's like, last thing I want to do is see you with another guy, so. Maybe it wasn't even out of courtessy. Maybe it was just for the sake of his own heart. But either way, heard some gunshots. I was like, hey, yo, I thought he was going to walk in. She had killed a guy, and that's what sets off things. But then she was dead. I was like, wait, what? I was like, no, that can't be. I mean, it's been a while since I saw the trailer. So I was like, wait, was all that stuff like... I was like, no, she was mixed up in everything, wasn't she? And then I was like, no, maybe that was all flashback stuff. He checked her pulse. I was like, oh, she seems super dead. But then I'm like, well, you can always fake that. The guy was gone. And then ultimately, when Mike was leaving, a guy was parked nearby, and it turns out that was someone his dad had following him. So then there's the cop, Andy, which I love that scene when the lady ended up giving him a sketch of what went down. But I love that the receptionist or whatever at the sheriff's station, she was like, oh, here. And it's like, wait, the witness had Toothless from How to Train a Dragon Drone? She's like, oh, no, that sketch is over there. I just wanted to show you that I had some artistic capabilities. That way you don't have to pay. We don't have to pay a sketch artist every time we want to get like what the criminal looks like. Andy's like, yeah, sure, thanks. I was like, I love that. I was like, wait, did she legitimately have the sketch artist draw Toothless? But it's like, no, she did that. I was like, I love that. But yeah, like, Andy went to confront Sonny, but it's like, yeah, like, the crime scene ended up not being, because, like, the moment he got there, it's like, the moment Andy got there, there was not a drop of blood. You're like, oh, cool. So it's like, right, she's faking her death for her. That solidified it for me. So I was like, okay, so all that stuff I thought I remembered from the trailer is like, right, they are neck deep in this together. So I was like, okay, so she faked her death and cleaned up the crime scene. Kind of like, I guess the point was like to fake, maybe she knew Mike was following her and she wanted to fake her death to get him off the trail, or maybe that was meant to, maybe she thought he would report back to Moss and that way she'd be able to disappear. Maybe that's what she was hoping for. Because the guy that was with her is the ambulance driver that came to pick her up. But the thing is, ended up getting... The problem is, like, Florida being Florida, as they said, like, Florida man was mixed up in, like, I think some... He stole one vehicle, ended up crashing into the ambulance, stole the ambulance, and then crashed into another. So it's like, yeah, I guess the argument is, like, even Deli's plans can't account for the age-old, unknowable, unpredictable Florida man, you know, so the elusive Florida man, I guess I should say. Not really that elusive when every, like, article reads about local Florida man or Florida man, like, you know, became the terminology that it is and everything. So her plan kind of went sour in that regard. Isn't the reporter Mike went to see later on the one he got the raw footage from the news report? I was like, wasn't that the same lady that ran the story about him? But I guess it's like, yeah, it's viral enough, but I guess it's like, I guess it plays into virality of things of like, yeah, something can be viral and the talk of the town. Like, once again, memes die immediately. Memes don't have the long life that they used to. They kind of do and they kind of don't. And like, something could be dead within a couple hours. It's like, oh man, this was funny, and it's straight dead and no one, yeah, that meme's dead. Like, maybe that's kind of like supposed to be like, oh, like the virality of like, oh, your 15 minutes of fame. I want to say that was the same news reporter, but maybe not. I also love him constantly making these new cards. First for like, hey, this fake insurance company, like, consultant that he is. And then like to get the, having something to do with like traffic and stuff like that. And I love that he keeps making the cards. I guess you can't buy them in one, you have to buy them in bulk. So he literally bought one card, got a card, threw out the rest twice, and I'm sure that's going to be a recurring thing as he's kind of creating these new personas to kind of get what he needs to get by throughout this whole investigation or whatever. So obviously, when he thought Deli was dead, it hit him hard. Not only because it's not even just about his debt, it's because he liked Deli, the time they spent together, kind of knowing each other. Because once again, they're both trapped, they're both caged animals in their own regards when it comes to Moss. And this could have been like, it's like, right, she wanted to get out, she just wanted to get away, and just like, yeah, things played out this way. Probably also thinking like, right, if I had gotten to her sooner, maybe I could have saved her. Hell, if I had left with her, maybe she would have been okay. Like, if I had listened to her when she was like, let's get away, but he was like, no. Because time and time again, he's like, yeah, I'm going to get from underneath Moss, but she's like, you're never going to be able to. I think that's why she's doing what she's doing, because there's no getting away from Moss. I mean, you disappeared, he literally sent Mike after you, so it's like, I can never get far enough away that he can't try and come and get me, so. There is a situation where Sonny does eventually confront Mike because of Andy's like photo, being like, hey, you need to leave Florida, bringing your trouble here. I know what you've kind of mixed up in, whatever gangster shit. It's like, oh, you don't want my gangster shit messing with your gangster shit. It's like, yeah, like, that's why because I was wondering if there was some connection between Sonny and like whatever it is that Deli's here for, like, once again, this gold and stuff. I thought there might have been some correlation in that regard, or maybe it's connected to Sonny, and maybe he was a part of, like, that. But I guess, because, like, who did Deli go, I guess maybe because I was wondering who would have cleaned up the crime scene, like, I mean, I guess she paid someone, but, like, who's her, I was like, but the way Sonny's acting doesn't seem like he's in the know, not unless he's putting on a big performance in front of his son, so. Because Mike initially thinks it was Moss that killed her. The moment he's like, right, there was no body in the ambulance, because he's thinking like, oh, they disposed of it, but to me that just added to the whole she faked her death. And he thought about the crime scene getting cleaned up because he heard about that from Sonny, who heard about it from Andy. So you're like, okay, so he thought Moss is the one that did it, but Moss is like, wait, she's dead. But then lo and behold, at the very end of the episode, she shows up in his hotel room. So it's like, okay, you're still alive, but once again, what has this all been about? Well, it's just the first episode, so there's still, obviously, we have 6 more episodes to kind of unravel all this and find out, what this is all about, what the gold coin is, and does this fully connect to, because I think Gil said, like, this is about some kind of sunken, like, Spanish ships and stuff like that. Like, this might be, like, Spanish gold type of stuff. I did also forget about the element of the story where it's like, oh, how are you going to get a firearm through customs or whatever? And I love Mike being like, Moss, it's Florida. You can get a gun anywhere. So he just stole a gun off of a conveyor belt, and it's Clark Gregg's gun. And I love that he's at Disney World or whatever with his family, and he's so, and it's like, well, because he's law enforcement. At least he was saying that, and I'm like, what level of law enforcement are you? Because I know you're going to be mixed up in all of this shenanigans as well. And it's just like, she's like, you're going to go buy a gun, aren't you? And he's like, right, I'll be right back. And it's just like, okay, honey, sure. I love this. Like, yeah, I left my family behind because I don't feel right without a gun by my side. But now I'm also like, maybe there's shadier reasons behind it. Like, maybe no one's clean cut. Like, maybe everyone has, like, some kind of shady, like, thing going on. And maybe that's what ends up ultimately uniting all these characters. So, like I said, kind of a great start to the show. I'm very excited to ultimately see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and good